If you want to go back and be reminded of something, we encourage that. Okay, so we talked about pedestrians. We talked a bit about heavy vehicles. Jamie Robinson talked a little bit about heavy vehicles and swept cars and all that sort of stuff. And we want to talk about cyclists and motorcyclists today, hone in on those two road user groups. We've talked a lot about general passenger vehicles throughout. So we're giving now a nice rounded thinking about each road user that we're trying to ensure that they are safe using the road network. So I'm going to start with cyclists and we'll go through. There's a couple of little quizzes for you, a couple of points where I'll be asking you questions, and of course we'll try and hand out some prizes as we usually do. Okay, so this module for the cyclist component, identifying the requirements of cyclists for safe travel, pointing you at some of that technical information available, and there is an absolute mountain of it. So I'm pointing you at a few resources that I find quite handy as a road safety auditor. There's no doubt many others that others might know of and be able to share. Common road safety audit issues for cyclists and understanding basic cycling facility treatments and terminology and the like. That's what we'll cover off. There are these general categories I like to sort of think about when you're trying to think about cyclist safety and the requirements of cyclists. Those are separation, clear sight lines for both the rider and vehicles approaching any riders, appropriate space to ride in, a good surface. Speed maintenance is an interesting one. I'll talk a little bit about that and how it relates to safety, but that's essentially not requiring the cyclist to stop every 100 meters and trying to provide that continual flow through. Connectivity, so providing the, trying to fill those gaps between these cycling links and routes, and information to warn, inform, guide, and the like. So a road safety auditor really, I suppose, needs to think like a cyclist. How is a cyclist going to use this new facility or this existing facility? Would you feel safe riding that? If you turned, would drivers be able to see? Am I going to be riding in dooring zones and these sorts of things? So you want to put yourself in the saddle. As we talked about with pedestrians and other vehicles, you want to imagine yourself cycling all the different routes, making a right-hand turn, a left-hand turn, going straight, and trying to capture all of those to understand where the risks may present themselves. But you also have to put yourself in the shoes of different riders. And we like to talk about the 8-year-old or the 80-year-old, sorry, jump forward a little bit. The 8-year-old and the 80-year-old. And the general idea is that if you can design cycle facilities that cater for the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old cyclist, you will cater for all those in between. Now that's probably a little bit harder with cyclists because there are many varieties of cyclists within that band, and I'll talk about a little bit about those shortly. 8 to 80 is a good design philosophy for pedestrians certainly, and generally cyclists, but there's a few more little intricacies for us to deal with. But I do often sort of think, okay, if the route that they're providing is a strategic cycling corridor, would you let your 8-year-old ride on that? Would it be safe for them? Would an 80-year-old feel safe riding on that? These are some of the questions you might ask yourself. Okay, let's have a look at where some of this information is, and then we'll delve into some of that information. So the Austroads guides that you've been provided of, the guides to a road safety, part 6 and part 6A, managing road safety audits and implementing road safety audits. So this one and this one. They provide some information about cyclists when you're doing audits. The checklists, the prompt list in the back of Part 6A, provide you with some dot points to check the safety of cyclists. They're fairly basic and they only cover a few things. They're at least switching on the light bulb in your mind to ensure that you're thinking about cyclists in your audit, regardless of what it is. This document, the Shared Path Audit Guidelines, is a VicRoads branded document from 2012. So it's a little bit old now, but it's pretty good information about that dedicated shared path or cyclist path, and when you're auditing that, what to be looking out for. That's not a document too many people are aware of, but we've popped that into your memory stick and on Moodle, so you can have a look at it. In terms of getting into some of the guidelines and standards at a national level that we have in Australia and New Zealand for cycling, we've got the Austroads Guide to Road Design, Part 6A. So just to keep us all on our toes, the Austroads Guide to Road Safety, Part 6A, is implementing road safety audits. The Guide to Road Design, Part 6A, is paths for walking and cycling. So that's got some pretty specific requirements in there in terms of path width, clearance envelopes for hazards near a path, grades, when you would use different facilities and treatments based on volumes, how to approach intersections. So lots of really good stuff in there. So that might be a document that you're referring to get some help as an auditor. There's also this document, the cycling aspects of the Austroads Guide. So that was actually a document that's specific, that pulls together all the different bits of information about cycling in the different Austroads Guides into one handy document to look at. So that's available to you as well. And then you get onto the Australian Standard, which actually has some very specific requirements around traffic control devices. So this is 1742 Part 9 and bicycle facilities there. So you could have a look at that one as well. So there's a lot of information there, but wait, there's more. Because there's a series of VicRoads documents that are part of the Traffic Engineering Manual series, which talk about bicycle and pedestrian treatments at roundabouts specifically. This one is car dooring and how to deal with the car dooring issues. This one is strategic cycling corridors and what you might do on those. Bicycle lane design guidelines from the City of Melbourne is a pretty good document and another good one to have a look at if you're immersed in this space. And then there's the CROW manual, which is the Dutch bicycle manual or design manual for bicycle traffic. I mean, it's generally considered the Bible in this in this space. It's the go-to. And then you'll see that there's a few other ones out there available. This one's technical guide for conducting bicycle safety assessments for Californian communities. So that's not a bad document. This is the another UK one, and that's another one there. So just a raft of stuff there, and I've picked a few that I think are valuable, and we've popped a lot of those into your into Moodle, so you can access those if you like. There's a lot to cover. I'm not going to be able to go through everything in the cycling safety space at all. That's a career worth of stuff, but certainly what we can look out for as cyclists, as auditors when we're thinking about cyclists. Now, that's another point that I do often bring up, is that for some road safety audits, I will cycle through them with the team or maybe just by myself, just to get a feel for that. It's not a requirement of a road safety audit to do that. But there is this specific thing called a cycling audit, and that is where you absolutely ride through it. You ride through the whole scheme and around, and you capture information in that way. Okay, let's jump into a few issues that an auditor might pick up when thinking about cyclists. Absolute number one thing that I'm going to point out is longitudinal grades. And it's such a fundamental thing where a cyclist can drop a wheel into the grate and obviously come off. So the majority of these have been taken off the network. However, you do come across them occasionally, and you also come across them in areas where cyclists might be going where it may not have been as obvious. And sometimes, they can be large longitudinal grates as well, which is you can imagine a cyclist dropping a wheel into that, and you might think, oh well, they'll see that, of course, but they might be following behind a car, or they might be distracted by something, and we really just shouldn't be having those on the network. And of course, there's very good cycling friendly grates these days, which either weave or the like, and so those are very easy replacement. This one has been the subject of a number of sort of legal cases that I've done expert witness on, and really the obligation is for the jurisdiction managing that bit of road, or the party managing that bit of road, is to be identifying these things and rectifying them. As I said, it's 101. It's when I was expert witnessing these in a legal battle, I said this is the first thing I talk about when doing when running the road safety audit course for cyclists. The first issue. And those things. One of them was a shopping centre, and the shopping centre had longitudinal grades on the main path up to their main entry. And you might think, well, okay, it was built a long time ago, so can you blame them on that? Well, I think the point where they lost it was when they installed a heap of bicycle parking facilities right near their entry, which really stamped that, okay, now we want cyclists, and we're encouraging them to take this route. There's a certain obligation there to check the risks that may lie there, and that wasn't done, and there was unfortunately a serious injury to a cyclist exactly this way. Pop your questions into the chat as we're going, or comments. Happy to take those. I'll ask you a couple of things shortly. Another just common road safety audit finding, probably not as serious usually as that previous one in terms of severity of injury, but one you want to pick up nonetheless. So this is an example of Sydney Road and Blythe Street, for those who know the area. One of our Safe System Solutions office around the corner here. This is there was a new cycling treatment going all the way up Sydney Road. Lots of the green paint going in, bicycle storage boxes. So that's the little area in front of the traffic lane, so cyclists can store there, and some threshold treatments and other things. We won't get into those. The bit I want to point out is that Blythe Street T intersection runs. Then when Blythe Street gets the green light, they have the vehicles going out where the arrow is, vehicles going this way, but they also have a green arrow to let vehicles in. So the proposal was to install the bike box there. And what that does means is that cyclists will come filter up and store in front of traffic. Now, the intention of that is that so they get they're in view from the cars, and they can get across and get into their position. The cars see them, and it's all good from that perspective. But what we're going to have is cyclists storing in front of vehicles, and then a green arrow, and so the vehicles will be wanting to turn left with their green arrow. The cyclists will be in front of them and storing in not great positions. So that, as I say, it kind of tends to lead to more road rage style incidents rather than crashes, but it may involve vehicles going around them in ways, or some instances there may be issues. But those are very easily fixed in the design. Okay, so what we're going to do is a little quiz, but it's not a poll quiz that's going to pop up, but I'm going to show you a bit of the road network in another country, actually. And I just want you to type in road safety issues you see for cyclists particularly. And there's a number of them. There's quite a few of them that you might be pointing out, and all are legitimate, and you'll risk rate them all as you want, but we won't risk rate them. We're just going to find some issues. I'm just going to write one down, one of the many that I see. And if the first person to match the same one I see will be a prize winner. How about that? So here we go. I'm going to give another prize out for the person that can tell me which country this is in. Yeah, we'll go from there. So, yeah, jump into the chat and let's give us some issues and the country. Okay, this is looking good. Doing very well here. Okay. So let's give the prize away for what country is this, Johan? You've had a win with Wales. Yes. So you can tell by, I think that's, well, that's Welsh there. And if my Welsh is still as good as it used to be, I think that translates to cyclist dismount. Right. So, and who wins the prize of the same one I had? Well, Zinab, you are the prize winner for longitudinal grate, and I've just been talking about them. So how keen were the eyes there? Yes, a number of people got that, and so identified there that that's not a longitudinal grate for traffic, but just happens to line up exactly with the cycle facility. So there is the issue that we were just talking about, and as a prime example, if you were doing a road safety audit of this, you'd be picking that up and making commentary on it. But there were some other ones. So a number of people have pointed out the sight distance challenges created by the fence here, and I think that's a good one as well. So not only can cyclists not see if vehicles are coming, vehicles can't see cyclists popping out, and some people commenting on the surface, and I think that's a good one as well. So there's some sort of tactile surfacing to try to maybe alert cyclists or slow them down or something, maybe also to help pedestrians, visually impaired pedestrians and the like. But is that going to cause issues for cyclists? So that's another good pickup there. I'm just reading through. So Johan's quite amazed by the fact that each sign has its own little light, which I to be honest, had not noticed before that was in there. That is a very interesting little feature for nighttime travel. Maybe it's because it's dark half the year in that country. Okay, so there's an interesting comment that's come in also about, well, do we need a fence to stop cyclists riding straight through? Now that's jumping to a solution rather than us looking at the issue, but I'm going to run with that because it brings up a really interesting point. We've got this sightline challenge. We've got obviously the cycle path goes through there. How we would go about improving this situation? Well, obviously we would maybe try to bring the fence down so sight lines are opened up one way or another. So that would be a fairly good way that it could possibly work. There is a much more of a trend coming now to say that should these cyclists and pedestrians actually have priority across this minor road? Now you'd want to do a little bit of looking at the function of the road and the like, but certainly I think that there'd be merit to be saying, well, can we just continue this through and then provide a facility so the cars are the ones that have to give way? Now this is a there's an old transport planning principle that says, you know, the road user expending the most amount of their own energy should be given priority. I mean, very general statement, but I do like it, and it always resonates with me that the cars are in a good position to slow down and stop, and we can continue the connectivity and the speed maintenance through this. And but if you know it is like that, there's a cyclist dismount sign, and you know, is that not going to solve everything? Well, obviously the sight distance issue, so it's told cyclists to stop and dismount and walk across the road. And the question you've got to really ask yourself is, how many cyclists are actually going to do that? And sort of the hilarity, which I briefly showed before, there comes when you see this sort of stuff. And really, I mean, a cyclist dismount sign is just a pop out and an attempt to make somebody administratively feel like they've done their job, and we have not rectified the issues whatsoever. Cyclists will not dismount, maybe one very rarely, but no, really, you can just, that's just waste of space. But look at all these cyclist dismount signs. So you need to be sort of saying that that's really not fixing our issue. And thinking about providing that connectivity all the way through. And the reason for that is that in a road safety audit sense, in a road safety sense, is that if the cyclist dismount sign goes up and the issue remains, we've not rectified the issue. There is still an issue there. So I'll just pop up a little audit finding of a sort of somewhat similar issue, slightly different, but this was a new shared path facility that was being introduced in a big new subdivision. And one of the issues identified in the audit of this was that there was high pedestrian fences, high property fences that went all the way up to the edge of the shared path, and that there is the garage. So what we got is a point where there's really no sight distance for either the cyclist or the reversing or forward-facing car coming out of the garage there, and we could have an incident. So you can see there the audit finding written up. I won't read it all in detail. But it's describing that issue. And then the recommendation really there is to try to open up sight lines by potentially removing the first panels or changing the height, and explaining which of the ones where it's the most important, and then a little picture of an example of how it could be better, at least, so a cyclist can see that. Safe system energy on this one, put sort of within tolerable. Now it's sort of borderline. I mean, we know around the 30 km/h mark is the exponentially increasing death for cyclists. Really quickly kicks up significantly after that. This is really going to be driven by the speed of the cyclist, because the vehicle will pull out, the cyclist will hit it. there's always the scenarios that conjure up in your mind of cyclists being caught under the vehicle as it backs out and the like. But you need to make sort of this reasonable judgment of the common crash type as a result of this issue and what it would be. Now this one was a really interesting audit because the local government's what do you call it, like planning scheme requirements and the like for this actually had full height fencing in specific spots. So this actually conformed to all of their guidance for the structure, the area here. So this audit finding comes into them, and they say, well, that's all fine within the structure. And so, can you remove it from the audit report? Which I said, no, I can't remove it from the audit report. You know, my team and I have identified this as a potential road safety issue, and this is where, you know, it conforms with all their standards and guidelines and requirements, but it's still a road safety issue, and we were obligated to leave it in there. And so it did cause a bit of challenge for them, but eventually they changed that and they removed it for these specific scenarios, that requirement. And then admittedly they had to go and pay for the council that you know received the report and had that decided to go and pay for those changes to those fences in those specific circumstances and ensure that any future ones were not built in that way. But you will, as an auditor, be asked to remove things from your audit report because people don't like the implication, like what it's going to cause them in terms of challenges, and that's where we really have to sort of stay firm to this. Thanks for all your input on that that Welsh crossing. That was some really great stuff that came in. Okay, common audit findings are all the surface issues. So even though this one's not a longitudinal grade, it's parallel grade, so it's better. But you know, the cracks, the openings, the pits, and the like. So these are not only sort of issues for the cyclist hitting them and potentially coming off their bike, but it also can present challenges where cyclists may avoid these and move into more dangerous locations, into traffic lanes, into other areas. So you've got to think holistically about that. Another common issue we find, actually this one's probably bigger than just cycling initially, and then I'll talk about the cycling aspects of it. So the alignment of lanes through an intersection. So what we see here is that this left through, so the straight through lane on the left basically lines up directly with the footpath, the sidewalk. The straight through on the right lines up directly with the left of the straight through there. And this is a really common scenario out there for a raft of reasons. It could be that originally that was a traffic lane and things have been shifted over. It often happens in new developments as well, where things get skewed. And you know, you'll often see designers looking down, when people used to print out designs, looking down a set of plans with their eye to see how things line up and the like. And these are the sort of things you're looking at. Very easy to do in CAD and just draw your straight line and see how it all lines up. So when you're thinking about these with passenger vehicles, what you're often going to get are side swipe crashes, where you get the vehicle coming through here, and this who thinks that that's their lane because they haven't really, you know, consciously worked this out, and then this vehicle trying to squeeze in, and you get a side swipe crash. But we know side swipe crashes are very, very we can handle them at quite high speeds because a lot of the energy is dissipated, deflected out. It's like your old vectors from year 11 physics, but you know, the energy is pushed out into the environment. You know, you can sideswipe quite high speeds and not have high likelihood of serious injury or fatality. So what we're going to be saying on that is the severity is going to be very low. The likelihood's quite high, probably, because that alignment's not great. But then what happens when you chuck the cyclist into the mix here? And the cyclist is trying to get into this little spot here, and we've got this mix happening. They are the ones where the severity becomes quite high. The severity of that crash is quite high. So they're the ones that get the worst of it. So a few things to sort of rectify this or reduce the risk of it. So we use RPMs. So RPMs are raised pavement markers. So a lot of you have probably heard of RRPMs, raised reflective pavement markers. RPMs are usually used in intersections because they're the dome ones and you're not specifically reflecting light in the RRPM style. But you put those strategically placed through the intersection, which hopefully guide everybody in the correct direction. So that's one way to sort of help a little bit. But providing cyclists their own facilities in these circumstances can be good. And we're seeing a lot of protected intersections coming out, which I'll talk a little more later. But even potentially having cyclists with their own ability to go right up there somehow, thinking about that. As an auditor, really our responsibility is to point these issues out, let the designers and their project team really nut out how they're going to reduce the risk or solve the issue. If we can help out a bit, that's an added bonus for them. Another one very common we see is the cyclist approaching along and approaching the parked car, and then we have cars which are accelerating from this lane. And what are they doing? Well, they're focusing on when they can merge back in or trying to accelerate to merge. And we just have a bit of a nasty spot usually around here where the cyclist is trundling along and we have a following car, increasing speed, putting the foot down to try to jump, and all sorts of challenges there. So similar challenges and ways to try to reduce that are some separation, some different facilities for cyclists. Cyclists at roundabouts have been a challenge and are probably continue to be a challenge, although we're getting much better at understanding these issues. So this used to be the Austroads guidance for how to manage cyclists at low speed urban roundabouts, where you would basically push the cyclist as far away from the traffic lane as you possibly can, squeeze them around. The two issues presented as a result of that. The first one was as vehicles approached the roundabout, they looked out this way so this is not a conscious thing, but unconsciously looking for a vehicle to give way to. And the cyclists coming through it doesn't really trigger as much in their brain as something that they're going to have to give way to. It's very subconscious stuff. In fact, if you're interested in it, the psychologists have a field day with this one. It's called the look but failed to see, or look but did not see crash. So this is where a driver could clearly see, a cyclist, but it's not what they were actually looking for in their subconscious. So they didn't process that and take the correct action. So if you wanted some good bedtime reading, Google look but failed to see crashes at roundabouts and enjoy the wealth of behavioural psychology information out there. But nonetheless, it was identified that really the positioning also played a role because the cyclist was not in that central position. So that's one. The second one, which is probably more, a bit more to it, is the fact that as the cyclist was out here, a lot of vehicles tried to squeeze through, and then we had trouble. So tried to do that sort of overtaking of the cyclist in that spot. And it wasn't. So I suppose the next evolution, and this still exists as an optional way of treating these, especially these low speed, lower volume, is to use these symbols and try to encourage the cyclist to claim the lane Now, I'll give a quick prize for the first person who tells me the official name for that symbol. It's going to be tough for a few people in other jurisdictions, I dare say, because I think that's a pretty Australian used thing. Mark has jumped in and got it. Sharrow, correct. And it's sort of a mashing of the words shared and arrow, because it's trying to show that this is shared space for both cyclists and vehicles. So it's called a sharrow. Kathy, note that down, prize for Mark. So the idea, as I mentioned, claim the lane, get in the middle. That means the vehicles are not going to try to squeeze past. It's a better spot for the vehicle that's looking to see for active. This always, though, does take me back to that 8 to 80 call. And I mean, are we really expecting an 8-year-old to claim the lane when they've got a big 4-wheel drive bearing down on them or something like that? I mean, it's a fairly, it's more targeted at your more confident cyclists, really. But it is sort of what is generally recommended in those scenarios. But I'll come back to those as with some other options for you. But we see here 2-lane roundabouts and cyclists has become a real challenge, because the cyclist needs to turn right. Well, you're either sticking to the left and then you're going past traffic coming through and it's a big challenge, or you're going to have to go across high-speed traffic to get into the right lane and come through there. So it's a very challenging environment to cater for cyclists. But we unfortunately do see this sort of stuff on major cycling routes. So how we deal with it's challenging. There are a number of different sort of scenarios that are being proposed, and some of them are being built with different separation for cyclists and pedestrians. So here's one example which has got a sort of offshoot for the cyclists in terms of their own path, and then a cyclist priority through there. And then it's not cyclist priority here, but waiting for the traffic to go through, and then some staggered points. So it's not bad, and it certainly caters for the cyclist turning in one way. It also acknowledges the major traffic function that roundabout's probably providing from left to right on the screen. That kind of philosophy, though, works really well in these urban areas. And here's the mock-up of Moray Street roundabout in South Melbourne, for those who know it. It's been built. It's out there operating and operating very well. In fact, my colleague did an evaluation or led an evaluation of it. All working very well. And essentially what it is that a cyclist wanting to turn right sort of exits the roundabout onto their own dedicated facility. But the dedicated facility runs all the way around the roundabout. And this is inspired by the way the Dutch basically provide that cyclist priority facility around the roundabout. And this one's even got pedestrian priority around that with a wombat crossing, a raised zebra crossing. So essentially this vehicle approaches and is faced with another give way there, and has to give way to both cyclists and pedestrians. And so there it is built down on Moray Street. There's one just next to it as well, and it all seems to be operating quite nicely. I encourage you to go and have a ride of it if you'd like. It's certainly one of the facilities that we take our cycling auditor course through, which is where you basically come out on your bike and ride with us for a day, and we take you to a whole lot of facilities and areas that are not so good, and we look at them from riding through them and the like. Lots of different little designs popping up. This was an interesting one from a road safety audit perspective, where they're trying to cater for cyclists, but does it present other issues? Maybe. Well, this one really had the cyclist facility, which was nicely separated on the approach in the dual lane roundabout. and the cyclist was then to go through. And then there was this little area where the cyclist could prop to stagger their move. So any vehicles going through here and wait for their gap and then take the next move over here. One of the designers refers to that little thing as a mammal pouch, which a mammal is an acronym for a middle-aged man in lycra. So the lycra-clad cyclists on their expensive racing bike, and what will they actually use as a facility? And yeah, so that's an example of this very varied type of cyclists. You've got, your kids, you've got your commuter cyclists, you've got your recreational, very casual cyclists, you've got these racing, training cyclists. So, how do we cater for all of these? Well, this was an attempt on that. And what I had some concerns, or we had some concerns with, were sort of the swept path of larger vehicles, the ability for the cyclist to be sort of looking behind them as well as out here. So it had some merit, but it had some challenges. This one, again, trying to provide facilities for cyclists on a double lane roundabout. And you can see here in the plans, what they've got is the shoulder, and then it goes to a separated cycle facility through at least the straight leg of the roundabout. The right turning cyclist in this occasion doesn't have any facilities really at all, but the dominant movement is right to left on Princess Highway east out here. So, but let's have a look at that when built. So yes, you can see they've got a cyclist only sign, end cyclist lane. So trying to get the cyclist off here. So let's have a look at that as built. And there it is. You're approaching that. Now this is, the design's been built, off it goes. As a cyclist, I've been riding along the Princess Highway there and approach this. At first glance, I actually think that I have to jump in and navigate through here because that's a footpath, that's a sidewalk. There's a little cyclist only sign there. What is it actually referring to? I'm not 100% sure. When we analyze it in a bit of detail, we can probably put that together. But let's try and put ourselves in the saddle of a, everyday common cyclist. I think that facility is hardly going to get used at all for what it should. How could this be rectified? Well, potentially just a bit of green paint there, to me, would have made this very clear as to what it should be. Obviously, you want it to be very good skid resistance green paint with the bike symbols on it, and that would have drawn the cyclist up there. That is not the traditional and actual reason you generally use the green markings on the pavement. I'll explain what that is for shortly. But it is now commonly being used as a way to show cyclists the safer route, or the route you want them to take. And here's a little example down Chandler Highway, Yarra Boulevard area, and you can see there that that's trying to show the cyclists where, trying to encourage them to go, which is actually on my cycle route into the Brunswick office. So I frequent that one. It's got some other issues, but we'll just concentrate on the positive there.
Ken, sorry, just to jump in there. Questions coming about, have you audited the new pop-up bike lane on Heidelberg Road in Fairfield?
Yeah, good question. Not officially audited it. We've been doing some cycling audits of proposed other ones that are coming up, but I've certainly ridden it with colleagues as we were looking at some of the proposed ones, and I think that it's got some wonderful facilities, and I think some areas that still pose some risks, but I think overall it's a pretty good job. I mean, there's a lot of controversy out about it. I think most of that controversy is really about the impact on traffic and traffic flow, and that's a sort of whole of society debate that will continue to rage as more and more cyclist facilities go out in in the urban area. Obviously, it's a choice to be made about how you manage your transport network and what your priorities are. And yes, some road users are going to have to go through some pain if we want to change the travel mix. There's no getting around that. But in general, from a safety perspective, I'm fairly comfortable with it. Definitely some tweaks that I would have suggested as an auditor. Maybe they were suggested by whoever did the auditing of that, or whichever team did the auditing of that. But the project team may have decided not to take them on, or that they couldn't for one reason or another. So, yeah, it's all part of the way these things play out. But very interesting facilities for those who haven't ridden those. I suggest just if you get out on your bike and yeah. Okay, let's have a look at strip shopping centres and dooring possibility. Dooring is this term that has raised its head in the last decade, really. I mean, certainly the issue existed before that, but it was captured in this term dooring, which is all of those times that a door is opened in front of a cyclist. And we've seen quite a bit of trauma associated with the dooring issues. Most of the really serious road trauma associated with this has not been the cyclist specifically hitting the door. That's certainly caused damage and injury, but the major ones are where they've hit the door and fallen into live traffic and been struck in a secondary strike by the vehicles in the running lane. So quite a few issues, and a really challenging one, and especially on roads like Sydney Road and your high streets and the like, where you're trying to prioritise traffic, pedestrians, public transport, cyclists. It's just a huge challenge, everything going through there, and an absolute huge reluctance to ever remove one car park, let alone all the car parking, due to impacts on traders and then community pushback and the like. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, or we're stuck between a parked vehicle and a moving vehicle in this one. And so let me just show you sort of some of the things that have been done and attempts, but here's a challenging one. Here's probably another demonstration of even why somewhere like Sydney Road becomes even harder, because you might think to yourself, well, that audit that we did in the little desktop exercise pulled the car parking from here out right up to the edge of traffic lane, and then the cyclists had this nice run curbside where they weren't subject to at least the moving traffic. There still can be some dooring challenges. You can maybe provide a bit of space. So is that not a possibility here? Well, in these situations, to do that, you then remove the ability for this to be operating as a clearway, which it does for part of the day. The clearway being that nobody's allowed to park here because this becomes a through traffic lane, this one and this one. So even if you just line marked it, what you'd inevitably do is, if you line mark this as cycle, I'm going to try to draw the bike symbol, but at some points of the day, that is in the middle of the running lane. So you don't want to encourage cyclists into that position during a big portion of the day. So it's a really challenging environment from that sense. Sometimes when you have permanent parking, you can mark it like that, and that provides some assistance to at least show cyclists and drivers that there are cyclists present and provide them that sort of facility. And there's been some work done around some green markings in the sort of exact position you want cyclists to be riding within that, and a few other things. But really, we do like to try to move to that Copenhagen style lane when we can. And it caters for the majority of cyclists out there at this stage. Almost at the 8-year-old, maybe not. It's still a bit hairy in my mind for that, but it's pretty good for most commuter cyclists and recreational cyclists. Will the mammals use it? Maybe yes, but it's a little bit more challenging. But we're sort of at least catering for quite a bit, and it's generally considered the safer, excuse excuse me, the safer alternative. It still comes with its risks, and you probably identified some of that in looking over that plan that you were analysing. Certainly, some of the bigger risk locations are the points where vehicles turn in, and that's because sight lines are blocked by these vehicles. Vehicles coming out and where they prop and store, and issues that are caused by that. There's little minor annoyances like how people unload their pram and you know, the drinks that go into the shops and those sorts of things. So you've got some challenges like that. You've got to think about disabled access and all of those sorts of things. But in general, considered a safer treatment. It becomes quite challenging when you try to do multi-directional cycle lanes in these Copenhagen style treatments. Certainly the vehicle turning in risk significantly jumps up then, because the car turning in is really looking for cyclists in one direction, and then they come from behind them. One of the things I like to recommend when auditing these facilities is some sort of threshold treatment on that turn in, even be that, you know, bluestone, cobbled, little raised bits and pieces to slow the turn of the vehicle just before the conflict point. You see, here is the traditional use of green markings. Green markings are meant to be, or were originally used for the conflict point between a vehicle and a cyclist, to warn the turning driver or the approaching driver that a cyclist could appear at this point at some time, so be aware. So that's what its original purpose was. As I say, it started to morph into being used for a few other things in guidance and trying to get cyclists into specific areas. How are we going on time? Okay, we're doing pretty well here. So this is an example of how you give a shared path priority, certainly in Australia and possibly New Zealand as well. What you're actually doing here is creating an intersection, as in you're saying that this is a road in its own right, in a sense, and that vehicles approach it and they give way until the intersection is clear. So then you start to just revert to some usual intersection principles of sight lines, clearing sight lines, making it you know, clear who's got priority, and those sorts of usual things that we like to do. That signage scheme's actually changed in the Victorian guidance, at least. It should be now that in the VicRoad supplement document, or the road design note on that. Anyway, that's just a little aside for those who are playing along at home. And there's one Kathy took from the passenger seat, because she's obsessed now with ensuring correct signage on the road network, which is a big win for everybody. She's sat through so many of the training courses, she can't stop herself. That's back to the other one, and that's what you see as a cyclist. So it's fairly clear, you've got a good run through. Hopefully it's clear that it's continual priority. But what I would suggest, if you're doing a road safety audit or a cycling audit of this, is not just look at this crossing, right up to the next crossing. Is it continuing that priority, or does it change? And this is a very interesting one for those who know the area. It's up around the North Carlton area, really. And as you're running along, you get this really nice priority crossing, or across three, I think it's almost three in a row. And then the fourth one is the other way, and it's not that clear that you don't have priority. So I get a bit concerned by that one, and I mentioned that to a few of the council people as well. But think about that whole route, how this fits in with that scheme as well. One-way slow points. So this is a common local area traffic management feature where you try to, you will basically place a squeeze point, and you make drivers sort of give way to each other as they're, only one can fit through, so they slow down, and it's a decent traffic management feature. I point this one out because this has got the cyclist bypass lane, which is a lovely facility in my mind. A lot of local area traffic management will squeeze the cyclists in with the traffic, so a chicane, or a roundabout for that matter. You're really squeezing the cyclists in with the traffic, but this one gives the cyclists a nice free run through while the vehicles fight it out in the squeeze point. So there's this, I talked about this, the shared path audit guidelines. If you're asked to do an audit of a shared path, get a hold of this, dig it out of Moodle or your memory stick, have a look at it, get your head around it. The process is very similar. You're just looking for specific features for the shared path itself. And a few things that I'll bring up, we get out there when we ride, and it's good fun. I won't take you through all the different equipment that I like to take and the like, but some of the safety issues, the width of the path, obstacles, hazards on the path or near the path, horizontal and vertical alignment of the path, the conditions of the surface, and then how we intersect it. There's other minor things like structure height, clearances from that perspective, and a few other things. But really, the intersections, it's best to provide that clear priority, good sight lines, advanced warning, guidance with signs, ideally 90-degree intersections, and reduce speed where possible through there. These are actually very similar principles to a normal traffic intersection. But here's an example just out around the Bendigo area where it's really unclear which path has priority, and there could be some challenges in this area. Here's another one which sort of actually gives you an impression that priority is probably the other way around, where you can see I've got the aerial there where we're looking down, photos taken from about here looking down. This is actually the main path where the majority is. So I dare say that actually should be marked with, that this one doesn't have priority. Obviously drop-offs, and there's in the Australian Standard and the Australians Guide, there's very specific sort of drop-off grade hazard requirements. And as an auditor, you don't need to be 100% driven by that, but it really can help you if you go, ooh, not sure if that's an issue or not. That can help you. Certainly would also help if you have that in your mind, so you can report all of those, whether you want to risk rate them differently depending on how you see them as a risk. But certainly you can imagine this one coming down these, and you've got the big drop off into the channel there, so it's a significant issue. These sort of drop offs are obviously going to be issues for cyclists, and you might think, oh well, I've got a path there and that should be fine. Well, remember, these are shared use paths. There's often dogs on there, there's kids, random things, and so cyclists may be moving along at a reasonable pace and have to avoid and move out of the way, and that could be a significant issue. Similar, I mean, less risk, but hazards close to the edge of path can be issues, and again, there's specific guidance on what would be acceptable. This one's a bit better. You can see a cyclist-friendly fence in the background there for the cyclists coming around here and not dropping into the channel there. So that's some positives. These sorts of things really, fairly obvious during the day. At night, it's not delineated. The lighting's actually really poor here. How think about those sorts of things, and at absolute minimum, we want to put delineators to make that stand out at night. A lot of shared paths, are in these, specifically put in these areas because of the available land, and these areas flood. and then we get a lot of debris and junk on the path. So that's often a time that you might get asked to do the audit and see what the damage is and where things need to be rectified. And certainly the fencing, there are specific cyclist-friendly fences, so you've got to have a think about the fence. Will it snag a handlebar or a pedal? And so these certainly are not cyclist-friendly fences in that sense. They're, easy snag points as you're traveling along and avoiding the dog that jumps at you, or something that happens, or you're going in a little fast or the like. There's just a very classic cyclist-friendly fence, but I suggest you have a look at your local jurisdiction's cycle-friendly fence approved products and make sure you're using some cycle-friendly fences that mean that snagging is much less a chance. No, this is another one where I've been an expert witness or involved in legal cases on, which is cyclist paths separated by a barrier system. And so this is a type B W-beam, or from other, if you're in other jurisdictions, a G4, you might call it. But so, it's probably a really great thing that the safety team or whoever's decided to put this barrier system in to separate an errant vehicle from the shared path or the footpath. However, the back of these posts are quite sharp, and if that's your cycling area, which is just being built into a shared path, this one, it presents quite a hazard if a rider was to fall off and land on that. And unfortunately, we've seen that, and certainly councils have been sued and successfully sued as a result of that. So there are options you have available to you. You've got back-to-back systems that you can provide. There's certainly flexible W-beam back-to-back systems. There's post capping available, so you can put caps on each of the posts. So a lot to think about there. And again, when you're trying to stop cyclists going into areas, jumping all the way back to our Welsh example and talking about, do we put some fences up to stop cyclists? Well, it's not ideal. You really want to try to provide that cyclist connectivity through, except for on some major crossings of big priority roads. But this is to stop vehicles getting into these areas, and I don't know using it as a cut through or doing burnouts or whatever they in the paddock. But this chain there, you can imagine that at night, a cyclist approaching that, not being able to see, avoiding, maybe seeing this, avoiding, and the chain there, somebody's put a bag around it probably to try to warn other cyclists of the danger. But yeah, we really got to have a think about that and make sure it's delineated. I think this is a decent setup for a cycle facility, all things considered, where the cables stay holding up a power pole, no doubt, is right in the middle of the path. Ideally, we wouldn't have that. We'd have that somewhere else. But if it has to be there, we've got delineated, flexible, these are flexible bollards, some clear line marking on the approach, highlighting of the hazard with the yellow, the orange there. For what it is, I think it's a decent effort. So we've put a little 2-page sheet on how to do these thematic audits, the cycling audit. It's on your USB, it's in Moodle. Have a look at that if you're asked to do one. It just gives you some good information. But for every road safety audit, you need to consider the needs of cyclists. And I think we've got a little quiz before we jump into the next session. There we go. So remember, you're not being marked on this, but good chance for you to do that. And let's have a stretch and a pause for 2 minutes before we jump into our next session. Back into it shortly. couple more people to answer their questions, but I'm pretty well there. Okay. Okay, thank you for those who popped in your answers, and most of you are absolutely on the right lines and listening intently. So which of the following is not a common cyclist requirement in infrastructure? So cadence, cadence is a cycling term, how fast you are pedaling, but no, that's not what we're worried about in terms of a cycling infrastructure issue. Separation, we like to try to provide that where possible. Connectivity and clear sightlines are good ones to be looking at. And the name for that shared space arrow, which we talked about, a sharrow, as a lot of you got. It's got a chevron in it, and a sparrow is not. It's a word like sharrow, but not it. Thank you for that, everybody, and doing well here. We've got our last road user group to cover off, and then we will tell you what your road safety audit is and how you're going to go about doing it. So let's have a look at motorcyclists, and it's an area that I've been working in quite a bit, infrastructure for motorcyclists over my years. So for this one, a bit similar to cyclists, we want to identify the requirements of motorcyclists for safe travel, point at the technical information, identify some common issues for motorcyclists, and understand the terminology. So really, motorcyclists are probably our highest risk road user, and depending on which bits of research and evidence you look at, somewhere between 20 and 30 times more likely to be killed and seriously injured than the same travel in a passenger vehicle. And I suppose it's no surprise for that to a lot of you, the inherent challenges of a motorcyclist, obviously no protective shell in terms of like a car has, inherent instability only on two wheels there. So the vulnerability and the ability also to get up to speed. So there are just sort of fundamental challenges, but it doesn't mean that we ignore motorcyclists. We need to consider them just the way we consider every road user as a legitimate road user, and say, what can we do within the infrastructure we're building or that's being built to improve the safety of motorcyclists? This is something that we worked a lot on about 15 years back when I was working at Vic Roads, managing the motorcycle safety infrastructure program at that time. And we really honed in on developing this Making Roads motorcycle friendly product. And there's been some versions of that reproduced. This is a later version of it, and there's another one coming along very shortly. So this talks about all those features of infrastructure that we can improve to make it safer for motorcyclists. And then that's been replicated in New Zealand, New South Wales, Western Australia, and a number of other jurisdictions. Yeah, that's a tricky little wally there. I'll give you a helping hand on that one. Snuck in there with the chevron alignment markers. Okay, here are the 5 S's I like to think about for motorcycle safety. Now, this is probably more in Australia and New Zealand because there's an extra S that I would put in if I was working in a lot of other jurisdictions around the world, and I'll give a prize for the person who can give me that other S. So we've got sight, surface, signs, strike, and speed. So can the motorcyclist be seen, and can the motorcyclist see what's coming up? Is the surface appropriate? Are there warning signs to guide, to warn, to inform? what is the strike hazard? So when a rider is involved in a crash, what are they hitting? How bad is it going to be? And what are the speeds of travel of both the motorcyclists and vehicles surrounding? So as I said, if I was presenting this in Thailand or Vietnam or those sort of nations, and a lot of others around the world, I would add an extra S to that. I'll give a prize to the person who can come up with that S. Have a guess if you like. It's always yeah. So you're getting some some good answers, some comical answers coming in as well. No, it's a sort of infrastructure consideration. I'll leave it out there for a little. Richard's got it. Separation. So add a prize there for Richard, Kathy. So separation. Now the reason I probably wouldn't put that in Australia is I think we're at about 3% motorcyclists, maybe climbing a little bit in urban areas with some other features and other types of bikes and things coming out. But in these countries where you have a huge proportion of your fleet being motorcyclists or small powered two-wheelers, the idea of separation is a genuine thing that should be taken up, and you should be thinking about separating. Similar to the way we're talking about cyclists and that separation, well, really those separated motorcycle powered two-wheel facilities are a genuine thing that should be looked at. Okay, risk. We've talked about, and you've done some practice risk rating of things. But it's really the probability times the consequence, or the likelihood times the severity, however you want to phrase those. But it's the chance something is going to happen and how bad is it going to be. And when we look at those S's that we talked about there, the sight, the surface, and the signs are all trying to address the chance of the crash, the likelihood, probability of the crash. The strike, the crash is happening. How do we minimize the consequence, or what is the consequence of that? How bad is it going to be? And speed is our magical thing in road safety because it influences both the chance of the crash and then how bad that crash is going to be if it does still happen. If you're going at lower speeds, you've got more chance to stop, to avoid, and then just the pure physics of it is about the consequence. Okay, let's have a look at these S's one at a time from a road safety audit perspective, and then give you your audit to do. Okay, sight. Well, obviously a motorcyclist is a smaller object on the horizon or in the road environment than even a small passenger vehicle. You can see there some measurements of sort of standard. Interestingly, the eye height of a motorcyclist is higher than a eye height of a driver. But anyway, that rarely comes into play into anything you're doing, but just of interest there. We like to add these safety margins on the outside of motorcyclists to cater for the lean. So you're thinking about that as well. But anyway, this is really just to remind you of the size difference and the ability for motorcyclists to be hidden at intersections and things that you probably wouldn't consider sightline blocking things. This one's sort of just showing you this very little sign blocking a good portion of that motorcyclist coming through there, but things like signal controller boxes, trees, shrubs, these sort of things where you might say, oh no, it's very small, it's not a sightline impediment. Well, it may be for a motorcyclist. And even that dynamic visual obstruction is enhanced very much for motorcyclists, where dynamic visual obstruction is that term I've been using a few times now about that sightline impediment that's not always there. So it's a car, it's dynamic, it moves, or a truck or the like. So have a think about that and where vehicles will prop, and especially around intersections. So that's your sort of challenge when you get an intersection design they're planning alterations for the intersection. How are vehicles going to prop? Where are they going to be? Is that going to block sight lines to motorcyclists or other vehicles? And yeah, it's a challenging little exercise there. So when motorcyclists on these sort of touring routes and other areas don't have good sight lines over a crest or something like that, it's important to really ensure that we're providing that good guidance for the rider as to what's coming up. And this is, I mean, this is good practice across all road users in these environments, but motorcyclists are especially vulnerable to some of these changes. Motorcyclists are also one of our most aware road users in terms of picking up signage clues and the like, and quite very alert to these sorts of things. So that motorcyclist will now have a good indication of what they're approaching, at least. This sign is not a commonly used sign, but for me, it's one of the most valuable little signs out there for motorcycle touring routes. And this is a curve that has two radiuses. So we've got one radius here and then a second radius there of the curve. And it tightens up. It's what we'd call a compound curve, is its technical name. Some people call it a double radius curve. Compound curve. Now, compound curves are, you know, we put this warning sign on the approach to a compound curve. We might put the curve tightens supplementary plate. The reason for this is that a motorcyclist sets their speed and their line based on what they can see. Yes, they'll take into account what we've provided them in pre-warning and speed advisory, but they are heavily influenced by the geometry of what they can see. Now, what they can see here is a curve of a certain radius, and thus they are likely to position and you know, and set their speed into this curve accordingly. And what happens is that it tightens up. And the pure physics of it means that they have no option but to go onto the other side of the road. And that obviously is going to be a bad thing. If it's a compound curve in the other direction, they will be going on to the off the road. Now, this sign is proving to be really effective to highlight to a motorcyclist that this curve's going to tighten up on you. So, you know, be very, when we said it was a 35, take it as a 35. Now, admittedly, motorcyclists won't likely go that 35, but that's all right. They're using that as a guidance on what speed to go. Here's an example of a compound curve. Its approaches in, so the radius of this curve is 252. So I'm sure you all know what I mean by radius of a curve, but basically, if you continued that all the way around or a big circle, the radius of that circle would be 152 meters. And then it tightens up to a 117 radius curve as you go through. So, and interestingly, at this location, 4 motorcyclists run off road crashes. And so I think there's a few factors that compound this. So the first one being that compounding curve, excuse the pun. This bell mouth, I'd call this. So you call these bell mouths, which is where a road joins another road, and it's sort of like there's a bell look to it. Unsealed bell mouth, so likely to have a bit of gravel on the curve there. So when the rider's on a lean, you can see the issues coming together here. So this one, we've got vehicle 1, which is approaching and propping here and turning in, and vehicle 2 coming up here. Now, pop into the chat, which, just put a 1 or a 2, which do you think is more commonly the motorcyclist, 1 or 2? Wow. Gee, this group's switched on. Everybody's saying 2, and everybody is on the money. And that reassures me that you're thinking through these issues quite well. The reason for that is that motorcyclists are smaller, They're easily hidden behind these other vehicles. Don't get me wrong, this crash type happens for passenger vehicles, for push bikes, absolutely. But the sight line blocking by any little bits and pieces here from motorcyclists is certainly an issue. What can we do about it? Well, it becomes quite challenging in this perspective. In a lot of these situations, you could remove the keep clear. That may help. May make things worse. You could pull the keep clear line back a bit. So that, oh, might as well show you that. That's that actual spot. It's a very bizarre little idea to put a keep clear on this carriageway as well. We won't get into that. You can see there that the truck blocking the sight lines for this vehicle, but even a smaller car would block the sight lines of a motorcyclist shooting through there. So yeah, we could move the hold line back a little bit, open up sight lines for both the vehicle turning in to see, but also for the motorcyclist to have opportunity to avoid, to brake. We could link the signals. So you can see the signals up here and what are generating this. You could put another signal here that just links with this one, and when the queuing, gets back, blocks it there. That's done a little bit on Springvale Road and some other areas to try to alleviate this. There's some signage, there's some ITS style or intelligent transport system style solutions, detectors of vehicles coming up here and warning signs. There's options there. It's probably one we haven't addressed that well. You can close it off too. Here you go, just another reminder there. You've got your intersection and you've got your platoon of traffic coming up, and the motorcyclist is in there, just hidden behind that tree. So thinking about those sightline challenges. The surface, well, motorcyclists are often referred to as the canary in the coal mine when it comes to road surface issues. They're the first ones to be killed or seriously injured when we have surface challenges, because the fact that they, when they turn, they are on a lean, they have two small contact patches on the road, and they have inherent instability due to the fact that they're only two wheels. And so the surface becomes such a critical thing, especially on these touring routes, but also in urban areas to ensure that motorcyclists have the best chance of staying upright. So we want to try to provide that good skid resistance surface, no potholes, no bleeding, no flushing, no rutting, all the stuff ideally. Can be a challenge out there, but if there is any of that, between the time of identifying and getting it rectified, you want to really clearly warn riders that it's coming up. The most important spots for good surface conditions are on the approach to a curve, where the rider is braking, slowing down, through the curve, and once they're out on a straight bit, they're less at risk. But we still want to try to provide good surfaces. So good surfaces like this one, like all the roads around Australia, New Zealand, around the world, no doubt. Unfortunately not. So we see, depressions in the road. So this will destabilize a rider, make them potentially lose traction, and bounce them into other other lanes and the like. And we certainly investigated a lot of motorcycle fatalities involving road depressions like this, which is the rider's been sort of stuck on their line and hit a depression like this, which has moved them into opposing lanes. And unfortunately, we've had fatalities there. So that's just measuring under a 2 meter straight edge, you drop. And then, just all these surface issues, which I don't need to go through. They're just lots and lots of surface issues. One around work zones and the like is the debris. We do see a lot of debris around work sites being washed onto the road, be it being tracked out by trucks coming in and out of the construction site, or trenching, or even resurfacing. And it's important to remember that that does present a slip hazard for a motorcyclist, and a cyclist for that matter. and is something that we really need to be very conscious of when we're auditing these sites, or even if you're just doing surveillance of work sites. So we're going to need to think about motorcyclists as well. When we're doing patching works this maintenance works, there's a tendency to do these short patches, small patches, and unfortunately, it can often leave us with a join right in the line that a motorcyclist wants to take. And inevitably, on a patch like this, it tends to break up first in the join. That's about where the water can likely get in. So ideally, and I do say ideally on this one, we'd like full width patches across the lane. But I know there's cost implications to that. I just want it to be something that you're all conscious of, that those sorts of issues, can exist. Here's one that's breaking up, and there you go. I said it breaks up usually around the joins, and then what do I show you? One that's broken up right in the middle. But that's just failed completely. So ideally, we get these right. They don't fail like this, but what, as I mentioned before, is really important is to provide that pre-warning. This is on a popular motorcycle touring route in the Yarra Ranges. It's a sweeping curve, and there's trees and things, so the sight lines around the curve are not great, so the stopping sight distance is not great. So a motorcyclist coming through there is really stuck in there at their speed and their line as they come around here, and they see this, and their only real option is to go outside it to avoid it. They can pull the bike upright and try and go straight through it. It's still going to push them out into close to the opposing lane. So the pre-warning of that is so vital, and ideally fixing it up in the first place. So we, around the road network, use a lot of steel plates to cover temporary trenches and surfaces and the like. And of course, they, when wet, are very slippery. And another one where you think, well, it's very obvious that it's there. Surely a motorcyclist is going to see that. Well, a motorcyclist following a car at night, bit of fog on the visor, and just making this turn may hit that and slip out. And that one mightn't be an initial bad first incident, but the secondary crashes are something to be concerned about. So something we would like to see more like this, with a skid resistance surface with colour to show it's there. Ideally, the bolts may be a little bit further in that, but that's what we're covering. So then we've got the idea of pit lids, or the any surface issues within a roundabout or an intersection where a rider is leaning or braking become a really challenging thing for motorcyclists. And so when you're looking at designs of new roundabouts or intersections or other facilities, it's important to identify these things and try to remove them from these traveling areas as quickly as you can. And in a design, it can be easy. It can be expensive, though, to move these services, but that's our job as auditors, to identify these and point them out as soon as we can. The skid resistance is obviously something that we want to be aware of. Sometimes it's very hard as a road safety auditor to identify what the skid resistance of a surface may be. Often I would, if I was worried about it, or I thought, oh, there might be something here, I would just recommend in the audit report for them to check the skid resistance. It's not our job as an auditor to do sort of scrim testing or anything like that to get these very specific skid resistance, identify these. And then you can do things like water blasting or the like to try to improve skid resistance. You can do these different overlays. This is a calcium bauxite style high skid resistant surfacing. You can see it's done on the approach to the intersection and through the intersection. Hasn't been done here because this is probably not an area the rider is braking or making emergency manoeuvres, or less likely to. And then we've got motorcyclists at barriers. Well, actually, I'm not going to go to barriers yet. When you do have a barrier, though, you want to ideally seal all the way up to the barrier so the motorcyclist has the best chance of regaining and recovering before tangling with the barrier. Motorcyclists are curbing. So the more mountable the curbing, the better for motorcyclists. I think that's fairly obvious. If the motorcyclists can mount the curb, a barrier curb like this is enough to destabilize a rider. So we want to try to think about that as one of the factors. I mean, obviously drainage is a big factor there. Here's a little video to show you of a motorcyclist approaching a roundabout. So you can see there that just that very small lip was enough to destabilize the rider and push them off their course. I don't think the roundabout's particularly bad. In fact, it was quite nicely highlighted, the lip, but it's just more to show you how small a lip can destabilize a rider. I showed that when I was doing some work in New Zealand, and we were talking about the grab rail, which was the thing that rider ran into, which is what you use, in crossing, so a cyclist doesn't have to dismount and unclip. They can just hold on to it and keep going. But I said, "Hey, bro, we use PVC piping for ours, so just break away, no worries." That was quite innovative. I'm not sure how it'll hold up to the UV light, but anyway, that's large painting, large use of thermoplastic line marking on the road is going to be a slippery area for a cyclist or a motorcyclist. And so we want to avoid these large sways of thermoplastic line marking. I suppose one thing I can almost guarantee, if you get into auditing and you do a lot of audits, you are going to get audits that with people who want to paint big stop signs at intersections and things to try to highlight the intersection to people that are overshooting it. Inevitably, that is going to add a slippery, dangerous bit of pavement right at the point the motorcyclist needs it most, probably. So just be aware of that. Signs, there are specific signs to warn motorcyclists in particular. These are the ones we use around Australia and in New Zealand. And you often use supplementary plates. So those are an option in your recommendations. If you think it's something that will be there for a while and can't be rectified immediately, that might be something to use. And just general signage and warning is so critical to riders. Temporary signage, but also permanent signage. We'll do a little quiz now, Kathy, if that pops up. Or it may not pop up. I'm not sure. We have that quiz. Okay, there it is. And I'll be back in just a second.
Okay, I think everyone knows how this works. So we've got two questions. Which of the following is not a consideration for motorcyclist safety in a road safety audit? And which type of curbing is safest for motorcyclists? So Ken just covered the curbing in that last little session there. Thanks everyone for jumping in and popping in your answers. Just about got everyone, so we do have everyone. Well done. I'll shut that one down and share it.
Okay, so Which of the following is not a consideration for motorcyclist safety in road safety audit? Everybody got sound. Yeah, certainly there's some loud bikes out there. That's not our area of concern. As road safety auditors, maybe as project manager or others, that might be an issue to deal with, but auditors, we're just focused on those safety issues. Which type of curbing is safest for motorcyclists? Well, mountable. The more mountable, the better, as I said. So there may be circumstances for drainage and the like, you have to use barrier curb, semi-mountable curbing, but the more mountable, like a mountable curbing would be ideal. Thanks for that, Kathy. I better tick along with strike and give enough time to explain the audit. So strike, here we go. It was a little bit of analysis I got a graduate to do quite a while back there now, just to take a whole stack of hundreds and hundreds of motorcycle crashes on curves and tell me what sort of things are happening. This nice diagram was presented, which was pretty cool. But 79% to the outside of curve. Okay, you might go, well, yeah, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's actually quite different to cars. So cars have about a 50-50 outside of curve to inside of curve crash rate because of, I suppose, the luxury of overcorrection you have in a car, where if you go in too fast into a curve in a car and drift out, you might overcorrect and go into the inside of the curve, trying to bring it back. Whereas motorcycles don't do that and have that ability due to their two wheels and will go to the outside of curve. So really that outside of curves on these motorcycle touring routes is so critical. And so here's one in New Zealand, the Coromandel, really popular motorcycle touring area. And you can see, surface issue, and we've got concrete bollards being used there. So quite a hazardous mix there for any motorcycles. And certainly strike hazard, your galvanized steel post here, all of these galvanized steel posts easily strong enough to kill a motorcyclist. And they have, and they continue to do that. So we need to think about the placement of those and potentially the materials that are used. So this new sort of setup, which, could we have consolidated these into one in the middle? I mean, that's not only an issue from the strike hazard of the galvanized steel post, but imagine a car's coming up here and, let's go back a second. I'm just going to draw this one. I think it's a good example. You've got a car coming up from this side road. This sign's probably about driver eye height, maybe. So we've got a sight distance blocking issue, first of all. So you've got to consider, is that needed? Why is it there? Could we remove it? But then if this car shoots out a little bit and a motorcyclist coming along here and avoids, well, they're faced with the knife edge side of the sign and a galvanized steel post. So we're presenting some challenges there. There's lots of strike hazards out there for motorcyclists and vehicles, but it's, we've got to look at every time we do an audit, can we minimize, can we reduce the risk of them? Or can we be using some sort of flexible product or breakaway product? And there are many of them available. I like this setup for a hazard marker. It's got a flexible rubber thing. It's good in some situations, not in others. But there's products available. You've got to think about motorcyclists leaning when they go around a curve. And so something like this close to the edge of the road could be a challenge for a motorcyclist. I think this one will be taken out by a truck before a motorcyclist, by that swept path of the truck, but nonetheless. So here's a staged photo of a motorcyclist sort of leaning as they go around a curve, just to show you that they sort of have that lean as well. And barriers. So we put barriers out on the road network to stop vehicles leaving the road and hitting trees, power poles, rolling over, and the like. And when motorcyclists are involved in crashes with barriers, well, there's a huge amount of research into this topic. And I'll summarize sort of 10 years worth of research out of University of New South Wales, actually, on these topics. About half your riders are on the ground sliding. The other half hit the barrier and go over the top. So what can we do? At least for half of them, we can address the underrun with a rub rail of some description, an underrun protection, so that instead of hitting a post and stopping very quickly, or worse, they slide along this. And so you can imagine sliding along here at 80 kilometres an hour and hitting one of those posts would be horrific. Sliding along here and hitting the rub rail and sliding along it would be nasty, but not as horrific. And you can certainly retrofit underrun protection to existing guardrail systems, and any of the new proprietary systems out there have their own products available. So here's a little video just of some of the crash testing. So you use the European crash test for motorcycle. You get a dummy, get some little alterations to it to make it a bit more like a motorcyclist than a car passenger, and then you crash it into stuff. So here's motorcyclist 60 km/h crash into post, and you can see that just obliterates the dummy. But then if it's got an underrun protection, it's a more friendly crash. That passes the European crash test at 60 km/h with an underrun protection. Obviously, hitting the post does not pass at all. In fact, easily enough to kill the motorcyclist. At 60 km/h at 25-degree angle crash. And you can see there's a bit of deflection in that product, which is probably one of the important characteristics of it. So anyway, so you as an auditor might identify that that could be an option. They could add some of that underrun protection. You'll notice here that there's no underrun protection over this part. No prizes for that. It's because that's the end terminal. That functions very specifically, and you can't go adding things to it that we don't know what how it's going to change the functioning of the end terminal. So it's on the main part. And wire ropes often called the cheese cutter for motorcyclists, all these nasty terms. The reality is it's a hazard on the roadside like any of the other hazards out there, and the wires themselves don't play any role in any of the crashes we've seen so far. It's not slicing them up into chunks. I am a licensed motorcyclist. I'm not an active motorcyclist, but yeah. So I think that this is a big overreaction for something that is not a major issue for motorcyclists. There is some merit to it because there's nothing really great to do for underrun protection. The best that is available at the moment is post padding, these cushions, which sort of act like football goalposts, padding to try and help things. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be as good because you're trying to absorb energy over a short space rather than redirect energy along the system. But anyway, we don't use wire rope systems on popular motorcycle touring routes because they're too windy, and you can't put a wire rope system on a curve with a radius less than about 200. Otherwise, when you tension it, you pop the posts out. I mean, that's just the physics of it. But if you did have a popular motorcycle route like this one, the Bass Highway, South Gippsland Highway, on the way down to the Motorcycle Grand Prix at Phillip Island, where you get a heap of motorcyclists, over a few weeks a year. But anyway, it might be worth considering post padding if you're going to use wire rope, as the auditor suggested in this one. These days, if I was auditing this, I didn't audit this one. If I was auditing this, I would say use back-to-back flexible W-beam with underrun protection every time. But that product didn't exist back in the time we were doing this project. Anyway, so lots of pictures of some good stuff. One to be aware if you're doing post-opening audits, a big mistake that people make is connecting the rub rail directly to the post. Actually, a lot easier to install it that way. That's probably why they're doing it. But you need to bracket it out as a specific bracket. The reason for that is if an arm or a leg can fit through a gap, it probably will go through as a motorcyclist gets mashed up against that system. So there's quite a big gap there. You can see, there you go, a leg can easily fit through that. And so we want to, try and fill gaps here and and think about where we're directing an errant rider as they slide along things. And we want to try to influence speed the best way we can. There's lots of good ways to do that. Touring routes, good delineation, use of chevron alignment markers is a great feature. Advisory speeds, regulatory speeds, it's all there and available to us and something we should be using. Consistency is key here. So don't get concerned that a motorcyclist may not stick to that 35. Just be concerned if this one's marked 35 and then the one that is exactly the same in terms of curvature down the road is marked 45. That's concerning. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that, I think. There are motorcycle-specific audits as where you get a rider, you get your team, you have a following car, film it all, you get the rider's perspective, you get the auditor's perspective, you work as a big team, you talk it through. It's a really wonderful experience. And so you can see here, this is sort of dash cam footage. We had our rider out there. Rider was commenting on stuff, we were commenting on stuff, and you sort of put that all. And just like cycling, we've given you a resource sheet on thematic audits for motorcyclists, although that picture is the cyclist one, but don't worry, there is one for motorcyclists in your in Moodle and on your USB. So have a look at that. I've also put a little video of sort of things to look out for from on a bike, so you can see some of the different features. So have a look at that as well. And I'm not going to do the case studies because we need enough time to talk to you about your audit report. Case studies I can talk you through later. I've pre-recorded one of those anyways. Actually, I've pre-recorded them both, I think, Kathy. So we'll put the pre-records up if anybody wants to continue watching them. Yep.
2 videos, Ken, the Great Ocean Road and the Roundabout One motorcycle case studies. Yeah, I know. Yeah, don't look so surprised.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
They're there. So did you want me to run through where that stuff is now and you can talk about the assignment?
Yeah, so we've only got 5 minutes left, so we better jump into that straight away, Kathy. I'll just check any questions that are coming up as we go. But when you jump into Moodle, if you go down to after today's session, you got there you go, the case study videos. Thank you. So you'll be able to watch those. You've got those resources that I talked about, and you've got a quiz there that you have to complete, just like you said.
Choose just the one question. We let you off easy for this round, which is just the Wally question. There was a few more Wallies than usual, I noticed today. Anyway, and then we're in module 5 here, and you jump into complete your road safety audit site visit.
So this is the big bit of work for you. You're gonna
all of this. No.
Yeah, no. What you're going to do is you're going to find your site. Look at all those PDFs. Okay, they're all either individual ones. There's one in Sweden there for Johan, not Johan Tay, Johan Strandroth. So you find the one that's got your name marked next to it. There are a few that have 2 people assigned to it because it's close to 2 people. So we've given you the same one. And you're going to find that, you're going to download it. That's your plan. That is what they're planning to build. And you road safety audit what they're planning to build. Okay, you still need to go to the site though, and you download your template report, audit report, and you get that. You're going to go to the site, and you're going to have a look at the site, the existing conditions, the plans, and what you then report on is what are the issues when they build it that are going to either remain road safety issues or new issues that it creates. Then you're going to write up an audit report. And to make your life easier, we've highlighted in yellow anything that you need to change. So you only need to change the things in yellow. And we've given you this template audit report, and you can use this in the future if you want. Rebrand it yourself, do whatever you want, but it conforms to the current Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6 and 6A, which meets the requirements. And you're going to put your name in there, Road Safety Auditor in Training. And then keep going. Now you're going to do this one by yourself. If you happen to see the person that's also got your site, you know them and you want to work with them as an audit team, we'll let you do that. Submit your own reports, but you can work together and discuss these things. You fill out any information you've got there. We only want you to do a daytime inspection. Okay, so we should probably unhighlight those, but anyway, don't do a nighttime inspection. It's not going to save in there, is it?
Probably not. It does.
So daytime inspection only. And the idea of you doing an inspection is to get a feel for how it operates and what's going on out there and see different issues out there. We don't want you to get on the road and measure lane widths and put your head down to look at the crossfall or anything like that. Be safe out there. Just get an idea, get a feel for how it's all operating. Then go down a little bit further, Kathy, please. Give us a bit of a description of the scope of what they're planning, little location of the site. But this is where you're going to be spending your time, because we want between 3 and 5 audit findings fully written up. So you're going to write up what the issue is, put a snip if you think it'll make it clearer. And that's one thing you get marked on, is how clear is this? How obvious is it what they're talking about? And so a snip certainly helps you out there. Remember that formula or the recipe we said, the issue, the crash that could happen, factors that influence risk, any standards and guidelines if applicable. Then you risk rate it, and you've practiced that. Then you put the safe system energy. Then you put the recommendations, and you categorize those recommendations. And we want 3 findings, or up to 5 if you really want to do more. But if you get 3 and they're all spot on, you'll get full marks. So you don't need to do more to solidify your full mark. So 3 is fine. So those ones are just in there as examples. So you've got some stuff, but you delete those. Then you sign your audit report. You always sign a report. It's an official document. You sign it and you put your date in. And what we want you to do is put 1 photo. We only need 1 photo. In a normal audit, you put lots of site photos. We only want 1 photo, and we want you to be in that photo. So we want a selfie or prop it up there and make sure you're in the photo. The reason for that is we want proof that you went to site. That's one of the requirements that we've set in this course, that anybody doing the course has done an audit, been to site, and because you will see the value of going to site to generally see how things operate, and little bits and pieces you will never pick up on Street View. And so we want you to go to the site. You then finalize that, ideally PDF it, upload it to Moodle, and it'll be marked. So Kathy, when is it due?
It is due next Tuesday, the 9th of March. So ideally, if you can get out and do your site visit sometime between today and Friday's session would be great, because if you've got any questions, we've got Friday's session together to ask those and raise anything, and then you write it up and submit it by next Tuesday.
So Friday session, yeah, we can have a general chat about anything you want. We'll talk about some general policy stuff and registration, accreditation, and all of that for auditors. But we are going to be jumping in and working hard on this. As per always, if you have challenges, questions, you're confused, get in contact with us. Send us an email, shoot us a text, give us a call. We'll organise a time. We'll help you through this. We need to get you up to that 80% mark to pass this course, and we will work with you to make sure that happens if you're struggling. So feel free to reach out.
Ken, just a question. So where you get the drawings from is, I'll just show you that again. That's just here. So in here is where your site is. So this is the location. With sort of maximum 20-minute drive would be the longest. So we've tried to keep it nice and close to your address that you've given us. So some will be quite short and some will be that 10 to 15 minutes or so. So in here, everyone should have a site with their name next to it. So navigation. Okay, so we're going into
Okay.
in module 5.
We can see a Word document. We can only see a Word document, Kathy.
Oh, sorry.
So
My apologies.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah. So in module 5 in Moodle, and here's your site in there.
Find your site. So there was a question that came in about the module 3 assignment. Yes, you should do that. We talked about that at the end of module 3 about what you're doing. It's another sort of interactive in Moodle quiz style one where you're dropping words in and you're writing up recommendations. So yes, you should do that before you even attempt the audit, because if you're getting that, once you get those right, it'll help you out in your auditing. So do that module 3 assignment first if you haven't done that. I think most people have done that though.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have. Are we okay with where we're getting where? So the template is in module 5, the Word document up the top there, and then your site is there next to your name. I think, is everyone good to go there, or any further questions?
I hope that's clear. In Moodle, you'll find it. But just call, email if you're struggling.
Yeah.
All right, it's good. It's past.
It's way past time. So sorry.
We've
Okay.
got to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Get in contact if you have any challenges, but get out and do that audit. Be safe. Be safe out on site. Don't do anything stupid. Park safely.
Wear your high-vis vest.
Wear your high-vis vest. Okay. Thanks, everyone.